getting this sort of growing sense of anxiety about the fact that a lot of the data, and not only the volume, but the resolution of the data being collected about us, and it's self-inflicted, because every time we're offered a free product, whether it's Gmail, Facebook, or increasingly, have you noticed with Amazon Prime, they're offering free cloud hosting, and allegedly, Windows 10 is the worst offender. It is a spy engine, and what it's being used for now, and they make no bones about it. The new privacy policy is an eye-opener. They've essentially said everything you do to interact with any kind of product that Microsoft offers will be used to train AI. And it's no mistake now that apparently Cortana has even leapfrogged Google now and has left Apple Siri for dust because they've harvested so much data. Now, how can that data be shifted away from the center towards the edges? Can blockchain, or is a storage, it's called storage, but it's spelled weirdly, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sworn from the
right, so
IPFS.
Is that within the remit of this?
Well, that damage is done. You can't take data back. What we have to wait upon is a first legal challenge to the fundamental, first data principle of
well, that's been done in terms of safe harbor.
No. Schlems and all of that, they haven't done it yet. First principle of data protection throughout the world, European Data Directive, is you have to opt in.
Exactly. How do you measure criteria?
Consent. The way everybody works
yes.
is you have to opt out. That requires a legal challenge somewhere, and that not encryption, blockchain, or any technology is going to be the first base
leveler
in what you say. That is going to be the beginning of not necessarily getting our data back, but getting it regularized so that our data is our data.
GDPR, has anyone heard of GDPR? General Data Protection Regulations?
So I'm not a fan of all
that's yet to come. That's 2018.
The cyberpunks,
yeah, May 2018.
The cyberpunks keep on giving. I mentioned zero-knowledge proofs. So another example to show the power of this. So I've got my genome on my phone. You got your genome on your phone? You got your genome on your phone.
Well, obviously, I have, yes.
You're very concerned about your privacy. Mine's on GitHub. But for us to benefit from comparative genomics, we'd like both to be computed. So what a zero-knowledge proof does, wraps my data encryption, yours encryption, goes into a public space, does the computation in encryption form, and then gives Simon back the answer. He's agreed that I can have the answer too. So if the hacker got the central public processing unit, they would just get scrambled eggs.
Because they don't have the key.
That's for the future.
Right.
Right now, we can't
so
take it back.
Unless
there's a legal case that says, no, Google, you've got to destroy all the data that you've wrongly gathered about this person, which therefore applies to everybody. You can't take it back. So I accept what you're saying, James.
Yeah, I agree.
That's for the future.
Pandora's box or whatever.
Well, so one of the big issues here is contextual integrity, which is the idea that data occurs in a certain context, often around us doing a certain thing, and when it moves from that context to other contexts, that violates the social contracts around where it collected and where it occurred. So I've seen a friend doing a research project on Android phones where they look at permissions, and you say, do I allow this app to access my data? And you say, fine, I'll share this with the app. But the bit that you don't see is that that app then shares it with 400 other parties behind the scenes who are collating other data from other sources. So even going to Google and saying delete this data doesn't work, because at that point it's already been shared with all of the other people.
There's an important point in that, and that's a fundamental law of contract. Contracts are very simple. You have to have an invitation to treat. Unless you know something, you can't even get involved. You then have to have an offer, and then you have to have an acceptance. If you don't have all of those three things, you do not have a contract. I think it's so fundamental. That's where all of these things.
And of course, they'll say
It
it's
just takes
implicit,
somebody
the
to stand
pop-up,
up and
terms of service,
take the challenge.
that's the offer. You want to use the product?
Yes.
Do you? Yeah, you do. Yeah, of course I do.
But
Well,
it's
then you've given consent.
It's even worse, and this is Bill Buchanan's mantra at the moment. Google deliberately muck up your data, but they know on aggregate there's 50% men and women. They can still get the answer, but they do the right thing. They mess up the data, they make it messy.
What do you mean they depersonalize it?
Yeah, they
anonymize
anonymize it.
and redact it?
Yeah.
They
That's
profile-
fine, problem with
profile
that.
it into
But they still
entities.
can have the perfect answer if they had perfect knowledge over every item. So they've got a summary statistic that gives them the perfect answer, though they've got this mechanism. So they think they're doing the right thing, but they're not. They're actually worse. They've muddied the waters to look like they're doing the right thing, but have got more accurate information.
So there's a couple of different approaches people take here. One is synthetic data, where you take a whole bunch of personal data and you construct a model that will generate more data that fits that, which is good in some ways, but it means that that is only as good as the model you could already make of the data. So it limits how much it tells you. The other is differential privacy, where rather than giving people raw access to the data, you let them query it, but you add some noise to it the whole time. And you have this trade-off between how accurate you want the answers to be, how much noise you add, and how many questions people are allowed to ask.
Is this like a privacy shield? Kind
So
of, you just
it's a
say,
privacy
take a
shield.
peek, here's the transaction, I'll give you some of my personal data in exchange for product or service, and then you shut it, the privacy shield, so you have the control.
But these things only work if it's someone who wants to behave well that has the data. So
Right.
it's a way for good citizens to be able to use large data sets of personal data safely without incriminating people.
So
One of the side effects of the GDPR is that when people give you targeted ads, they're going to have to explain why they've targeted you with that ad. So there's going to have to be a button where you say, why have I been shown this? And they're going to have to expose all the data sources that they use in
It's a
making that
regulatory
decision.
nightmare.
So, which can be very interesting because
And it's going to favour the big guys who are going to have the resources to be compliant, and it's going to destroy the ecosystem of early stage companies who can't possibly ever comply. And have you seen the draconian, if you shunt data to the States unknowingly, or don't get the correct consent as a startup, you can get so heavily penalised that it'll take you down. 4% of gross turnover or something, I think it is, or 20 million euros, whatever the fines are. But they're harsh and quite scary.
yeah, but I was hearing him, and there's one thing, even if you only give us a small peek of the data, it depends how people on companies use it there, because targeting a person for advertising is one thing, but you can also use that for not novel purposes. Actually, targeting people for advertising is not novel, but not so bad. But you can use it for actually quite evil purposes. So it all depends on whether you are training an AI to help people, whether you're training an AI to understand, to do voice to text conversion better. But there's a gray area there. But yeah, I'm sharing this information, but I don't know what will be the end purpose of that information.
So that's a really good example, because in a previous life I was involved with the digital mapping world, and so we were one of the first ones to go and digitalize the world. So both Navtech and Teleatlas. And Teleatlas, we obviously, the company was sold to TomTom. And so the reason the company was sold to TomTom is because one of the cool software applications we built was to be able to track GPS probes and feed that automatically back into our database, and therefore we automatically got an incredible view of the world. And so where we thought this road was one way going that way, when we saw everybody going that way, and so it meant that we didn't have to go out and remap the world with our cars and special cameras. So that's cool. So then TomTom says, well, you've got billions of data areas now, and we're helping you create a better product, and you're licensing the data to Google, which was also a customer. Now that's all great, and we anomalise the routes, and we took the first 200, 300 yards off, and the last 300 yards, 400 yards, and we didn't know where people lived. But the fact is then that we knew the routes people took, and we knew the speed at which people travel. And so that becomes really cool, because then you can tell people this road's really slow on a Monday at that time. That's called HD traffic. The downside to that is that you can actually end up licensing your data to the police force. And they know the hotspots are where people are speeding. And so all of a sudden, a data point which started quite innocently can actually become
It's been used
to
against
bite you
the
back.
populace,
Absolutely.
right? The citizen.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
For the
no,
yes.
and using things for advertising, you can also be